So in my presentation, you'll hear me giving maybe the examples. All will be from Makerere because that's where I work. And mostly I've worked with training grants, which are funded by NIH. So I felt that it's very important for me to give you a brief background of what I do so that for all the examples, for all the details that I give in my presentation, you'll be having a perspective of where it's all coming from. So I've handled 3 audits for 3 projects, and they've all ended successfully. And these have been training grants. I'm not an accountant, I'm not an auditor, I'm a project administrator. So I'll only share what a project administrator does in handling audit or in preparing for audits. So these are our learning points. 1, what is an audit and its importance? I know in May we had a session with Rebecca. She really taught us on she presented on the A133 audits and the Yellow Book audits. So I know we learned what an audit is, but we can remind ourselves still in this session. We shall also learn the importance of the audits, how to engage with auditors, and how to be proactive when it comes to audits. So being productive will help us to have a successful audit. So you don't wait for things to pass, but you have to prepare in time. How to engage with auditors. We will get to know, okay, I know most of you know, but auditors are human too. So you learn how to engage with them, what to do and what and they don't. So I believe this is going to be an interactive session because I know there are people on this forum who have also handled audits. If time allows, they will also share their experience, probably maybe in the chat, or they'll always give us what they've experienced. So this is the presentation outline: definition, the importance of an audit, why do we have to prepare for audits, how do we prepare for audits, what are the stages of an audit, the entire process, how do we account for funds, and some other helpful tips for us to have a successful audit. So an audit, an external audit, this is verification of the financial statement or internal controls of an organization by an objective third party to express an opinion that the financial information is presented fairly and is materially correct. So auditors look at the financial statements, our documents, to really verify if our information, if the information we have is fairly and is correct. So the organization internal controls, they also check if the organization internal controls are working properly as designed. As you all know, different organizations have their internal controls. So auditors also come to look out for whether we are complying with these controls that we designed ourselves. Then thirdly, compliance with the donor and institutional policies. So they also check for that. I know those who have the award letters for NIH, the notice of award, there are certain conditions that are there. So the donors really check if we comply with those policies or the conditions in the award. So what is the importance of an audit? Audits help to maintain trust and efficiency of the financial reports or records. Financial statements are prepared in accordance with relevant accounting standards and are meant to provide information for decision makers. So without auditing, organizations can misstate their financial records. They can show that they are performing well, yet they are not. So auditors check, the audits help to check all that, not only to cause maybe problems to implicate you, but purposely to help you improve the way you do your work, the way you run the projects. So, and secondly, if we have audits and we submit very good reports, unqualified reports actually to the donors, that information can help the donors to really trust the organizations we work for any future funding. So those who work with the grants office, I know that you've had requests from donors asking for the financial reports. This is purposely to help them understand that the institution they are engaging with is credible before they award grants. So where are audits conducted? So we have on-site audits. Here auditors come and visit the campus, they visit the organization, and they usually actually sit there at the organization offices. So my experience has, we have also desk review audits. And here the auditors request for documents via email, but my experience has been with on-site audits. These usually take 2 to 3 weeks for each project. So the auditors come, review the documents, and then they ask you questions. As we will go along with the presentation, you will see exactly what happens at each audit stage. So why do we have to prepare for audits? Preparing for audits is a very crucial issue in ensuring that the project receives unqualified or a clean opinion. Now, these two statements sometimes confuse us, but unqualified report is a good report, a report with a clean opinion, much as the word looks unqualified. Then a qualified report is a bad one. It means that your financial records are materially misstated. So, but a clean opinion is really a good, here the auditor proves that your financial records are not materially misstated. So when you prepare for audit, it saves your time and even the auditor's time, because whatever they request for, they'll get them in time, and it usually builds a good rapport with the auditors because they know that when they will not take a lot of time requesting for documents and you're hiding here and there. So when you prepare in time, it will help them to not to be very rude to you. How do we prepare for audits? Yeah, planning for the audit is really important. It might take you a few weeks, a few months, depending on the complexity of your financial records. But as said, mine usually take 2 to 3 weeks. So in the planning process for the audit, I personally take off 2 weeks. I sit with the project management team and inform them that I need to organize my documents for the audit. So I usually take off like 2 weeks and without doing my usual assignments and really do a thorough preparation for the audits. So, but even the planning process shouldn't start when they've announced the audit. Still throughout the fiscal year, you need to keep your records up to date in anticipation for an audit. So sometimes I even do an audit of myself based on the experience I have. I know what they'll request for, so I usually organize my files based on what I know that they usually request for. And for example, if these are contracts for staff, the personnel, I know that and now the contracts are here, these are for this year, these are for the other year. So it's really important to do the preparation in time. So keeping up with the accounting standards, Now, this is upon the accountants. Here at the College of Health Sciences, we have accountants who are assigned to each project. So they make sure that they keep up with the accounting standards. They make sure that all the financial reports, the transactions are prepared and carried out in accordance with the international financial reporting standards. So the accountants know exactly what to do when it comes to the accounting standards. So assess any changes when you're preparing for audit, assess any changes in the project's financial and non-financial situations. The non-financial might be maybe the internal controls, the changes maybe in the NIH policies. So you need to assess, and even the financial ones can be, for example, you might have received a supplement as you maybe in the course of the implementation of the project. You can receive a supplement. So such changes in the finances, remember the notice of award has a different amount and you get more funding. So all that you need to look at such changes in your financial position and be able to answer any questions that come from the auditors. So you need to prepare yourself for such questions. But this can only be done if you're able to assess the changes that you have. There's a time when we had, sorry if there is noise in the background, I don't know whether you're hearing it. There's some noise here, but I know very soon it will go. So there's a time when I had just started working with one of the NIH grants that I managed first. NIH used to deposit funds on the project account, like funds for the entire year. But then in the course of the project implementation, they had to change to the payment management system. So if an auditor comes and checks the bank statement, for example, if they audited the previous year and maybe they saw that you used to have, your bank statement used to have the entire amount of the award amount, and maybe for the following year they come and they are just installments, at least you're able to explain that now we draw down funds that we are supposed to use according to the donor. So those are some of the changes that you need to assess before an audit, in preparation for an audit. So learn from the past. This is very important. Review the previous year's audit notes and recommendations. Improve by adapting and ensuring past mistakes are not repeated. This is very important because you never know, the auditors who maybe audited you the previous year might be the same. And when they come, actually, they can even ask maybe for the previous report. If it's the same company, they might have copies of that report. So you need to learn from the past mistakes, and so that when they come the following year, you're not repeating the same mistakes. So develop a timeline and assign responsibilities. So when you're preparing for an audit, if you think the workload is too much for you, it would be important for you to get people on your team and agree on who should handle this, and you give yourselves even deadlines. So this will maximize efficiency in terms of, like, if the auditors come and they see that everything is ready, it will be very simple for them to audit your project even within a period of 2 weeks or even less. So another issue is organizing data. So all the working papers and schedules should be organized and prepared to be submitted. So here, proper filing of your documents is really important. You must do the filing in a way that all the documents you need can be easily accessible when the audit comes. So these are some of the points that we need to look at when we are preparing for the audit. So what is the audit process? So what happens when the auditors come? What do they do? So first of all, there is an audit announcement. At this stage, the auditors will send out an engagement letter notifying the organization or the project about the audit. So this letter usually spells out the scope and objective of the audit, period and areas of review, the reason for the audit, names and contact info of the auditors, the expected start date and the estimated duration of the audit, and any documents that they may need in advance before coming to your site. So as we go on with the presentation, we'll get some helpful tips on how to handle each stage of audit. So the second stage is the entrance conference. So here the auditors meet the key personnel of your project to be audited, of the project to be audited, and discuss the objectives, the areas to be audited, the time frame, and even the logistics. So that entrance conference is really important, and it's very important for the administrator or the project manager not to miss such a meeting, because there you're able to see the people who are going to audit your project. You're able to tell who is difficult, who is easy, who is their supervisor. So as they introduce themselves, at least you're able to know how to deal with each one of them. So the third one is the document request stage. So at this time, the auditors request for certain documents that they need to verify, to read through before they even check your payment vouchers, or they can even do it concurrently. So these are some of the very important documents that they've always asked for first, but as the audit goes on, still you provide more. So one is the notice of award and the grant proposal. For those who have seen the notice of award for NIH, usually it doesn't show clearly what the project is going to, what's like the activities that are going to be done. So sometimes they request for the notice of award and the grant application purposely to see what you propose to do. They also request for an approved work plan, approved costed work plan. So this work plan has to be approved by the PI. It has to be signed by the PI or the project manager, depending on how your project manages maybe the organization chart. But for my projects, it's usually the PI who signs the work plan and the approved budget. So this work plan shows clearly the activities that you planned to do in that year. It shows, first of all, it shows the objectives, it shows the activities, it shows that who is responsible for this activity, what are the expected outputs. So as you're designing the work plan, it's very important that you make sure each and every person on your payroll has an assignment on that work plan. Sometimes they look at the work plan, see the people who are responsible. Are they the people whom you're paying every month on the payroll? So you need to make sure that everyone on the project payroll has at least an assignment on that work plan. Secondly, they still compare that with what you put in the proposal to see if the activities that you're planning to do are in line with what you're doing. So the notice of award also, before we go to this, the notice of award also gives them the conditions, the amount, the project period, So all these are important to the auditors. Once they read this, as they verify what you do, your payment vouchers, they will be able to tell whether you're complying with the donors' requirements. So unapproved budget is really important to them. As you know, the NIH award letter still just shows a breakdown for each budget line, but it doesn't clearly show how much is going to be paid to each person as salary. It doesn't show how much you'll be spending as airtime. So this detailed budget is really important to them to see whether you're spending as per the budget. So the policies and procedures. So for this one, you need to take note of the revisions that were made in these policies and procedures during that period that is under audit. So you need to take note of that. If there are changes in the per diem rates, at least you're able to explain once they reach the stage of verifying your payment vouchers. So you need to update yourself on the current policies and procedures of your organization. The financial statements, these are usually provided by the finance team. Although as a project administrator still, for example, for my work, I usually initiate the payment requests. So what I do, I usually keep track of the requests that I've sent to the accounts office. So I may not understand all the other reports, but at least I understand the cash book and maybe the income statement. There's that report that shows the expenses per budget line. So before the audit, at least I make sure I go through the cash book to reconcile the figures I have in my Excel tracker with what the accountants have. So this helps me to know whether all the expenses charged on my grant are supposed to be charged on my grants, because our accounts office manages so many research grants. So at least that helps me when you do the reconciliation before the audit. It helps you to remove those that don't belong to your project, such that you can have a clean report. So it's very important that as project administrators, we work with the finance team to be able to have very clean reports. They know what they are doing, but sometimes they get overwhelmed. So you need to have an eye there so that you don't have so many queries when it comes to audit. So the payment vouchers and accountabilities for any advance payments, these are always requested for, and auditors review them purposely to see how you make your request. Are they supporting documents on those requests? And secondly, they compare this with the financial reports that you've given them. So they are like supporting documents to the financial statements that are provided to the accounts, that are provided by the accountants. So other documents that you need to prepare, they might not ask them in advance, but you need to have them prepared. So these are the contracts and the MOUs. The contracts, these could be personnel, for consultants, the sub-awardee agreements. For training grants, we also have the scholarship award letters. So auditors use these to verify the personnel you have on your payroll. So if they are verifying the payment vouchers, they look at the payroll and then look at the contracts. Are you paying the right amounts? Are the amounts you're paying out tallying with the figures in the contract? Are you paying people for the right, like for the period they are supposed to be paid? So all those are checked. If they are trainees, are you making payments for the period stated in their award letters? So all those details are really very important to them. And in case you overpay, they might think that perhaps you connive with some people and they give you maybe kickbacks when you overpay beyond their contract period. So as people who initiate payment requests, we have to be very vigilant on certain issues. As you're paying, as you're initiating a request, you need to check the contracts so that you're able to avoid such questions and suspicions of maybe overpaying and maybe getting kickbacks from such people whom you're overpaying. An example I have for this, when I was still managing the first grant, there was an auditor who she requested for the contracts and I brought them, the scholarship award letters actually. So when she got them, she got to know how much each student is supposed to be paid for what period, and then she created an Excel sheet. So when she created an Excel sheet, let me give an example. If each student is supposed to get maybe $500 per month as stipend for 12 months, so the estimated total for that student in a year of 12 months is supposed to be 6,000. So that's what she did for all the trainees. And then as she verified the payment vouchers, still she created another column of the actuals. Now, when she got discrepancies, she called me that, this is the expected amount that you should have paid to the trainees in this year. Why is it that I'm not getting the same on the payment vouchers? So as I said that we have to be very vigilant, I remembered that we had made decisions on trainees who were not progressing. Some of them we had to hold their stipend so that they could progress, because stipend is mainly meant for a trainee to have protected time to do their research, to go to class. So one really has to progress well for them to earn a stipend, because in actual sense, we are paying you this money so that you don't have to do other things and concentrate on your studies. We had also passed another decision that we hold their 2-month stipend until they publish their work, until they submit their work for publication. So the good thing, I explained that to her, but the good thing is that all these were minuted. I had minutes to back up all these decisions, which I presented to her, and she had to drop the query. But what I understood from that, and the lesson I got, that for all the subsequent projects that I've been working with, I learned to include all those conditions in the award letter, so that when she reads the award letter, definitely she gets to know that, okay, if I have this discrepancy, it means that maybe this person has not yet submitted their work for publication, or this person is not progressing well. So those conditions are really important when we are drafting contracts, and they help you to reduce on the number of questions that you get. So the asset register and inventory list. Sorry, I've not explained much about the interview reports. Still, these interview reports are very important. The auditors are able to check if the selections were free and fair. So in case you're managing a training grant, these interview reports are really important. Actually, I personally keep, the evaluation forms that each interviewer uses. I make sure I keep all that, and I make sure the interviewers sign on them. Much as I compile a full report of the interview, but even the individual scores that are given to the candidate, I make sure I keep all that on file. This helps the auditor not to have suspicions of maybe supporting people who are maybe relatives to the projects, to the PIs. And it also reduces any false accusations, because you never know, as they come on the site, someone might meet them before you do, tells them, you know, I applied for a scholarship. Those people did not even award me. They gave their friends. So if you have all the documentation, it helps you to avoid such false accusations, and it helps the auditor not to be biased, because you've provided all the information that they need. So the asset registers and inventory lists, the auditors use these actually to show that, to see the assets that they look into the vouchers and see the assets you've bought, the supplies you've bought. So once they look at all that is provided in the payment vouchers in comparison with what you have in the asset register. So before an audit begins, it's really important that you look out for the assets you bought, check the condition, make sure the asset register is up to date, and know where those assets are. For the inventory, I've not really made too much procurements on my projects, but still, if your project buys a lot of stationery, a lot of maybe lab supplies or what, you need to show what was brought in and how it has been given out. So people who are taking that stationery or the lab supplies or what, they have to sign for that, so that they don't think that you as an administrator, maybe you created a small stationery shop somewhere. So it really shows the transparency. So the research performance progress report. So this shows, they usually look at those reports and see if the activities you implemented are in line with the objectives you were funded for. So these are also very important. They also look at the federal financial reports, and they compare these with the financial statements that are given to them. So that they check if you're submitting wrong, maybe different information to the donors compared to what is on the ground. And the timesheets also. These timesheets help us in effort reporting. They check whether you're paying the staff against the effort devoted to the project activities. So every month, your staff should fill in timesheets so that it's very clear when you're paying them a salary, it's very clear that they really deserve that salary. And they also look at these timesheets in comparison with what is on the contract. If the contract states 20% time effort, this means that the time sheet should have at least a total of 32 hours. So they really want to see value for money. So documentation on items that require prior approvals. So carryover of unobligated balances, budget relocation, maybe a second no-cost extension. So you have also to look at, maybe to prepare the documentation that you sent to the grants management specialist and have it ready somewhere just in case they request for it. So as we discussed that some of the documents that auditors really need to look at, payment vouchers and accountabilities. Sometimes we prepare our accountabilities maybe when we've not thought through, but it's very important that as you prepare your accountability, you put yourself in the auditor's shoes. you as maybe a project administrator or a program person, you understand that this activity took place, this took place, you know, but this person, an auditor, is an external person. So as you prepare your accountability, please put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't know anything about your project. So try to bring in, to attach as much detail, although it has to be relevant. Don't attach details that may cause you problems. But if you have a system that can make maybe payments be done faster, it's really very important to avoid these payment advances, because many people don't know how to prepare accountabilities. So as project administrators, we have to make sure that where possible, avoid giving out advances to people. But for some of us who deal with students who go to the field, they need research monies, they need this and that. Sometimes it's inevitable. And given the university system, payment takes really a lot of time that you may not want one's research to come to a standstill because they don't have funds. So what we do, we usually take them, like we teach them what to do when we give them the guidelines on accountability, and that has made my work simple. So for the per diem, I've just brought a few examples because mainly those are the advances that I've been paying out on my training grants. Per diem, in case it's an international travel, when someone is accounting, they have to attach the boarding passes. These really provide the evidence that this person traveled. And the boarding passes can also work on they can also be attached on the payment to the travel agents, payment for the air ticket. They really show evidence that this person traveled. So the person also who traveled has to give to write a travel report. And this travel report has to show maybe the dates they traveled, the purpose of the trip, the sessions, if it's a training, if the sessions they attended, the lessons learned, how do the lessons benefit the project, and perhaps include any plans on how to utilize the knowledge and skills learned. If possible, put in that report, add some pictures of that place where you went. This helps the auditors. If it's a conference, even include other people in your picture so that the auditor really sees that you traveled. Although there is, what I know, it's a Photoshop, but still, it's very important that you put in the pictures in your report. Then we also have advances for workshops and trainings. So when one is accounting for these, they have to attach invitations to the workshop, the agenda, the registration forms, payment acknowledgement forms in case there were allowances paid or facilitation paid to the participants, a report or minutes of that training if they are not confidential. So the more you give, it reduces on the time the auditors call you for explanations. So if it's a training or a workshop and I've given all these details, really there is no need for one to call me for an explanation. So the meals and refreshments, sometimes these are paid directly to the suppliers, but still the auditors would like to see if there were any invitations for such a conference or for such a meeting, and even the attendance forms. So much as these meals, we usually attach the receipt from the supplier, it might have gone through the procurement process. That is very fine, but still, for such vouchers, you need to attach the attendance forms and the invitation, and if possible, a report, so that this person doesn't think that you connive with the suppliers and they supply air and you share the money. So these two can serve as evidence that the activity really took place. If possible, you add on a report. Research funds for trainees. Usually they have research assistants to pay, maybe to give transport refund or per diem. So put on those payment acknowledgement forms. They can put receipts for expenses incurred, such as airtime, stationery, medical supplies, lab reagents, if these are in small amounts. Say if they are less than maybe, say 500,000 or 300,000, if you're not sure, ask the accountant or any person for guidance, because sometimes the procurement also takes long, but for small procurements, if you're buying, maybe if the researcher is buying these masks that people put on these days, if they are buying maybe gloves, and these are few boxes, really they don't need to go through procurement, but for such, they still have to attach receipts. So if you buy airtime for staff, airtime and internet for staff, it's really important. I know with internet, if one has a MiFi, definitely the company can send a receipt. But for airtime, we usually use the booth, those people who sell at maybe the MTN booth or Airtel. So those people give us receipts, but that's not enough, because you might go there and buy that airtime meant for your staff and you use it alone. So it's better to add an acknowledgement of receipt form somewhere where they can sign that they received that airtime on their phones. That is really important so that you do away with the auditor doesn't doubt whether these people received their internet or their airtime. So fuel, we usually use the receipts, and maybe there is a vehicle log sheet or log book that the driver fills in for every trip. So I decided to share a few templates of what we use, but as we use these forms, they look simple, but one has to think through when you're designing. If your organization has a standard one, well and good, but I know it can be modified still depending on maybe the situation. These attendance forms usually have the name, the institution, the designation, the telephone contact, if possible, email, but maybe, these emails, we need them actually for future communication to such people. But these two, if you're giving people per diem, so the institution matters actually in this form, because you might be having, maybe said for this meeting, it's held at the College of Health Sciences, the conference room. And then in addition to the attendance form, the auditor sees maybe a group payment form where you paid these people per diem. So when you show the institution, it helps this auditor to know that, okay, I'm seeing so and so. This one came from maybe Mbale University or Busitema University. They are able to tell that the people you gave per diem are really those ones who deserved it. But if someone puts here Makerere University and you on the payment sheet you gave them per diem, still that would be a query. So as we design these forms, we really need to think through. Still, if you're giving the allowances, maybe using different rates depending on your institution structure, the designation also is very important. For example, Makerere has per diem rates given like one's rank. If you're support staff, your per diem should be 75. If you're a senior lecturer, your per diem is this. So this column here for the designation matters a lot, so that when someone sees the discrepancies, the differences in the amount you're paying at the payment sheet, they are able to know that, okay, this one received this according to the policy or whatever document they supply I reviewed before the audit, like those documents that I mentioned. This person, I think, has to get this rate. This per diem has to get this amount, of per diem. So these attendance forms are really important. And even in terms of activity, you know, the NIH policy is that we don't give meals for our usual, maybe the weekly meetings, the project implementation meetings. So the activity also matters here. It saves you a lot when you put the activity and one sees that maybe this was maybe a training or something that is allowed, maybe it's allowed to give people the meals and maybe refreshments. So the activity also matters when for such items that require maybe giving people meals and refreshments. So these are really important documents that we need to think through as we are designing them. Then the group payment form, as you see, it has the phone number and the amount, the signature and the date, and the person who paid and their signature. So still this phone number, if the auditor is not convinced that you really paid this person, they can as well go ahead and call them. There's also an individual payment form, but still this one has the same details that we've discussed. So in case you're making individual payments, make sure that some details are captured so as to avoid queries. I remember there is an auditor who was auditing one of the projects I work with. So he looked at the attendance form, how people signed, and then looked at also at the group payment form and the signatures. Some of them were not actually tallying. And I hadn't looked at that carefully. So sometimes when we are holding meetings, when we are holding workshops, when you give people the attendance form, they sign any way they want. But when you give them money, they bring out these other signatures that they use in the banks. So that's what happened. And to a certain extent, there was a discrepancy in the signatures. So from that time, I learned that I usually make an announcement. I try to talk to these people so that their signatures are consistent. I know it's not easy for one to repeat a signature the way it is, but you know, for the attendance form, some of the people just wrote their name. And when it came to the form for payment acknowledgement, they really brought their serious signatures, which wasn't really good for me during the audit. But since the phone contacts were there, I had to tell the auditor to go ahead and call them and verify if he thinks these people did not receive the money. So some of those things we really have to look at them as we are organizing meetings or paying out money during the workshops. But if you can, if your system is really swift, you can use mobile money to avoid all that. So this form shows your accountability for fuel. If your company has maybe a fuel card, I know when you go to a petrol station, they issue out a receipt and a receipt of how much fuel and how much money that you've spent. So make sure the drivers fill in this vehicle logbook. It really shows the mileage, the purpose for the trip, the reason for the trip, the odometer reading. So when the auditors look at this, plus the receipt, you attach a receipt and maybe a good number of the sheets that have been signed before you refuel. Once they look at that, at least they will know. They may not even go into the details of what is there, but they might just sample one and see if the consumption was really, that's what maybe compared to the trips that the driver took, they will be able to check whether you're really spending the fuel very well. At Makerere, we usually have internal auditors. So all our accountabilities are submitted to the internal audit, and they really do a good job. So the auditors don't dwell so much into an accountability that has already been verified by an internal auditor, but still, we shouldn't take things for granted. We should always do the right thing. So field work. Sorry, we diverted a bit into preparing accountabilities, but I felt it was really important. So now the third stage of audit is field work. So at this stage, the auditors come, they conduct interviews with you, they ask you questions, they request for clarifications as they review your documents. So here they are actually on the ground to test the internal controls. These internal controls, like for example, if it's a procurement, who initiates the request, who approves, is there an evaluation committee? So all those are tested when they are on the ground. So they can also suggest financial adjustments and determine implication of errors. So sometimes you might submit a report to them as an accountant, maybe you can submit a report to them, but when it has those, maybe some minor errors, some mispostings, for example, when there is per diem posted under personnel instead of the travel budget line, they may not penalize you for that, but they suggest corrections, which you do, and they move on. So don't get scared in case there are any small errors that are found in your transactions. They always suggest corrections, and once you do them, they go ahead with the audit. So next is the exit meeting. So after reviewing all your documents, your financial statements, now the auditor has called you for an exit meeting. So this exit meeting, they share their findings, you discuss them, and where you don't agree, you give your reasons. If you have the right documentation, you give it to them, and they end up dropping some of the queries. So still in this meeting, you can agree on the timelines on when they can issue the draft report, because sometimes they call you for an exit interview when they have maybe just outlined their findings. But after this, they issue a draft management letter. And there you're given a chance to respond. You respond on each and every query. But sometimes it's very important that for the responses that you have, when you feel you have the documentation to support it, please attach it. So there is also appropriate follow-up on the progress. So all these happen towards the end of the audit exercise. So here I tried, I have an example of some of the queries that I've ever gotten from one of the audits. One, for my first project, actually, we requested for two years of no-cost extension. We first got the first no-cost extension, but still extended for another year. So it was supposed to end in 2015, but we ended 2017. So because the auditor did not know that with NIH, there is that leeway that you can request for a no-cost extension, she came up with this query and a recommendation. She queried that delays in implementation of project activities. I don't know whether my screen can project these in a bigger format, but I can still go ahead and read. So delays in implementation of project activities undermine future consideration of funding opportunities by the donors and may lead to failure to attain project objectives. So the recommendation here was that the project management is advised to address the cause of the delays in project implementation to avoid loss of future funding opportunities. So when you get such queries, even if you were an audit contact person, you need to go back to your team. Some of them you can answer them, but where you feel you need input from your colleagues, it's really important that you discuss with them. So here our response was that all the above causes of delays were out of control for the project because the institutional units or government bodies that approve the students' research protocols are independent and have their own schedules. So here we had to quote the notice of award that as per the notice of award we shared with you, it's mandatory for all trainees engaged in human subjects research to obtain ethical approval according to section this. So we gave the section on training related research project activities. So therefore all our trainees had to get ethical clearance, and there was no way we could avoid the delays caused by the different departments or institutions that are accredited to provide these approvals. So we had PhD students, we had master's students, but you know, the IRB, the National Council for Science and Technology, they usually have their schedules. Even if your trainee has a complete proposal, perhaps maybe approved by the department, they have to wait until maybe the IRB schedules such meetings for the researchers to present their work before the Research Ethics Committee. So we had to answer that and explain to them that some of these causes were beyond our control. That's why we requested for no cost extension to support these students to complete their research. Another example was the procurement plan. Now, this was my first project at the College of Health Sciences for me to work with, and I really didn't know that there was need for us to fill in maybe a procurement plan and submit it to the procurement office. So when you get such queries, really it's true that the auditor quoted this act, which I think as an administrator, I should have read for me to make sure that I submit the necessary documentation before starting any procurement. So they wrote here that absence of a procurement plan may cause procurement of unplanned items and may also lead to unnecessary procurement delays. It was really correct. It was the right way to do things. So their recommendation was that the project management is required to explain the matter and is advised always to prepare procurement plans for its projects and submit them to the university procurement and disposal unit for consolidation. So for such queries, you need to accept, but still, I went ahead and said that we have taken note of that. However, all the items that were procured had been budgeted for. So these items actually were in our budget, but you have to show that you've accepted and then maybe defend yourself. Sorry. And defend yourself, not in a rude way, but in a way that really shows that you've taken note of their recommendation. So here are some of the helpful tips at each stage of audit. So at audit announcement, what would you do? What tips can help us to prepare for the audit? So first of all, before even an audit is announced, you need to implement your activities in anticipation of an audit, especially when you know that you're working for a donor-funded project, but even the institutional, the government institutions also have the Auditor General's office. They usually audit them. So once you do that, it will help you always to have your documents prepared in accordance to the accepted principles. So prevention is really better than cure. So as you implement the activities, bear in mind, we learned about the cost principles. The cost has to be allowable, reasonable, allocable, and consistent. So as you process your payments, whatever you do, please implement your program, your activities when you're anticipating that there is an audit. So treat the audit as priority. Once they've announced, that's why I told you that I usually request the project management team for 2 weeks off or 3 weeks to be able to prepare for audit. This has actually helped me because I remember there was a time when they were auditing all the 3 projects that I'm working with, and I was the audit contact person. And to make matters worse, they assigned a different auditor for each project. At least if they had assigned one for all my 3 projects, I would have been able maybe to tell them that, let's first finish this, and then maybe we'll deal with the other one. But this time, these were 3 auditors, they all needed documents from me. They all needed me to attend to their questions, give clarification. So if I had not taken off some weeks to really prepare my documents, it wouldn't have been easy for me. But I went through it because I had really prepared myself. So whoever requested for the documents, I could hand them over like that and then attend to each one of their questions as they came in. So when you receive an audit announcement, still designate an audit contact person for your project. So for my projects, I've always been the contact person, but still I work with the accountants. So as they address the questions to do with the finances, I also address issues concerning maybe the program implementation. So we work hand in hand with the finance team, but there is really need for someone who is the audit contact, such that all the auditors can maybe address their concerns to this person, and he's able to contact the right people rather than having many people interacting with the auditors. You really need an audit contact person. So still at audit announcement, you need to organize logistics for the auditors. Parking, office space, these are really important for them to feel comfortable. At the college, this has been done, and we all get to know where the auditors are sitting, and that's where we take our files, any documentations that they need. So communicate to the project staff about the upcoming audit. So you need to inform the staff about the upcoming audit so that they are all prepared in case there are any questions. At least they are prepared and they know that there is an audit. They can even help you to organize or identify documents that may not be in order, so that since you've already informed them, they may always help you to organize whatever you need. Like I said, they always grant me some time off because I communicate to them. So at document request stage, this is the second stage of audit. So in case the auditors did not state the documents that they need in their engagement letter, please ask them for a list of the required documents. But if they already requested for them, then make them ready at the time of their arrival. Yeah, this removes the suspicion that you're just forging the documents. Once they request for them, it's very important that you submit them in time. And it's good that we've gone through what they commonly ask for. So as you do your work, you try to create a folder for such documents and have them ready in case the audit comes. Handle any subsequent record requests from the auditor promptly. So some of the documents might not be the ones we listed or the ones you've prepared, but it's really important that when they request for documents, you don't take long. Sometimes they get irritated, sometimes they get suspicious. First of all, these people come when they've already assigned themselves maybe a certain period in which they will do their work, a certain duration in which they will do the audit. Because once you give them the financial reports, they look at the transactions and say, okay, this is a small project. I should be able to handle this by this time. So the more you delay them, the more you irritate them, and they can end up being biased in whatever they do with your report. Review records. The records that you're providing to anticipate any questions and to ensure that they are what the auditors are looking for. So for all the documents that you're submitting to the auditors, please make sure that you review them before you submit them, because you might submit documents that are harmful to your project, and this might cause problems. So you might submit maybe a contract that wasn't fully signed, and somehow maybe it skipped your mind, or you didn't look at it carefully, that someone missed signing on this document. So try to look at them clearly before you take them to the auditors. So ensure that original documents do not leave your department or your project premises without prior approval. If you think these documents are really sensitive, please at least make copies and give them. But you can as well go with their photocopy, because sometimes they prefer looking at the documents maybe late maybe in the evening. Some people work late in the night. So you can take the original and you request them you make copies for them to look at if you feel they might lose your original documents. But if you take both, at least the auditor will be able to tell you that, okay, leave the photocopy. After all, I've had a look at the original. I'm very sure it's a genuine document. So do not provide documents that are relevant. Only give the auditors what they've requested for. Otherwise, providing irrelevant documents will bring in series of queries that you may not be able to answer. So if they are auditing maybe a third year of your project, there is no need for you to bring in documents of the previous year. So such documents might attract, auditors they don't just look at documents, but they go into the details and internalize it. By the time you realize that maybe I shouldn't have taken this, he can tell you, okay, you can also leave that behind. You can leave that. And before you know what, he can generate so many other questions which you shouldn't have gone into if you had strictly brought what they've asked for. So communicate the reasons for any significant delays in providing any documents. So in case there are documents that you are not readily available, if maybe this could be in the PI's office and maybe he traveled and you hadn't anticipated that they would be requested for, still communicate to them that, you know what, such and such a document is not accessible to me right now, but I'll be able to get it maybe at this time. So don't just keep quiet. They might think that you're dodging them. So don't allow auditors to have full access to your filing cabinets or stores and so on. So if they need certain documents and you feel the files are too many, or don't tell them, oh, I put my things in that filing cabinet. You can check for yourself, I'm very busy. As they check for those documents, they might discover even other things that you never expected them to get. If it's a store, please get whatever they've asked for, but don't let them, unless maybe they obtain permission and state, they should give you reasons why they really want to access those areas. Maintain a list of records provided to the auditor. Ensure all records are returned at the completion of the audit field work. So in case you were not able to provide photocopies for one reason or the other, at least you generate a list of whatever records you've given them and let them sign for them. I remember the university, say, offices, the finance office at the main building got burnt. So, and some of the documents actually were lost. So it's really important to have a record of whatever you provided them, so that for any future audits, you can explain to them, you can defend yourself that maybe these documents got banned from the other office. But still, I emphasize that even before you hand them over, at least have a photocopy on your file as you hand in the original documents if they insist to have the originals. So these are some of the helpful tips also at fieldwork stage. When the auditors are verifying your documents, please keep the audit focused. Don't divert in any other issues. If they are auditing a specific transaction, say NSSF, or they are auditing pay as you earn, they are asking you questions on pay as you earn, again, don't bring in NSSF. You limit your conversation to the transaction in question. You can explain how the transaction benefited the grant or the activities, such information, but still you keep in line with what they've asked for. Facilitate the audit. So make the project personnel available for the interviews in case they need them. So you need to make it easier for them, make the personnel available to answer any questions. Resolve audit issues as soon as they are brought to the project's attention. So don't overstay with an issue. You're free to consult the colleagues you work with, but don't say, this auditor requested for this, I don't have it. Then you continue doing your other work. It's really not good, because the auditor might fail to get back to you, and then you'll just find when he's presenting the same issue in the exit interview in front of other key personnel, yet it's something that you should have handled before the end of the audit. All parties should be informed on the progress of the audit. Consult your colleagues when you're in doubt of the responses. This, we've already talked about it. Please always keep your team informed on the progress, and where you're not sure of the answer, please consult them so that you collectively own whatever comes out of the report. So at the exit interview, be honest and open. I remember one time there was an auditor. Sorry, I'm giving so many examples, but sometimes I learn better when I remember the examples that the lecturer gave. So maybe I think this one will also be helpful. Being honest and open in audit is really important. I remember there was an audit by the Auditor General's office. So the auditor called me because he was auditing one of my projects, and another one was being audited by his colleagues also, who were also in the same room. Now I found this auditor when he was really disgruntled, was really annoyed by one of the PIs who had just left before I came in. The PI had told this auditor that, you know, this is my money, I wrote the grant, so why are you questioning me? Why are you asking me this and that? And this really pissed off the auditor. So here I was getting into the same room with interacting with this auditor who was already pissed off. So when the moment I came in the room, he asked me, "Are you so and so?" "Yes." "Are you also going to tell me that it's your money, like the other gentleman who has gone out?" But I was calm. So I told him that, you know what, I really value these audits, because you people, when you audit, we get to know what we are doing wrong and what we are doing right. And eventually we learn from you. That was my response. So for some reasons, somehow he started calming down and said, okay, so why is this like this? Why is this like that? Why? Can you provide evidence for this? He had generated a list of the questions he had for me. So we went through the questions, and for some where I felt that really we didn't do this the right way, I could accept and say, but moving forward, we are going to do ABCD. So that kind of interaction where you can accept where you're wrong, sometimes it helps. The auditor just generated a list of whatever I'll bring. We ended the meeting when he was happy and eventually left me there. No, I left the office before he left. But then when I had gone to his other colleagues who were auditing my other project, they told me, how did you manage that man? He's really a very tough man. We are all surprised that he treated you the way he did. This is because I was very honest and open with him and showed some kind of respect to him and appreciated his work. So being honest and open is really a very good thing when you're handling audits. So recognize they are experts, respect them, but don't fear them. So this is also important. Like I said, that I told him how I appreciate the audits and how I'm very much willing to learn from them. This made him feel that I recognized that he was an expert. So, and somehow this changed, I think, his mood and the kind of attitude that he had. So realize that they may not understand your project the way you do. Yeah, some of us are managing these training grants. We know the research the trainees are doing. We know about the IRB. We know the publications. Now, the auditors come from the accounting world where there isn't too much of publishing, where there isn't too much of research ethics committee. So as you're explaining to them, don't overshow them that they don't know what they are doing. Just tell them what your project is doing, but just understand that they may not know your project the way you do, but give the relevant information that they request for. So understand the purpose of the meeting and review related records prior to the interviews. This one, we've already talked about it. Ask the auditor to clarify question or any request in case you're not clear about it. So if you're not clear about something, please ask the auditor to give more clarification. Otherwise, you might end up providing what they've not requested for. Listen carefully and understand each question before answering. Still the same thing. Be sure to have your responses complete and accurate. This is very important. If you have a colleague who can review your responses, it's really important. Get a senior person, someone who is more experienced. They can help you to review your responses so that they are really complete and accurate. Keep your answers simple and direct. Don't talk so much, and weigh your answers carefully, being certain you have the facts to back them up. So whatever you say, just make sure that you have the facts to back it up. So what are the don'ts? Like we We've already gone through the do's, the don'ts. Don't speculate or answer hypothetical questions. We've already talked about that. Don't argue if you disagree with the opinion. Keep cool, clarify, and provide supporting documents. Sometimes auditors don't want people who over argue with them. They always want facts. So if in case there is an argument, please keep your cool. Don't quarrel with them. Do not provide irrelevant information such as office gossip. An auditor might query something and you say, you now explained to the PI that that wasn't the right thing to do, but still he went ahead and approved. I also don't know why. No, that's not right. So do not provide such information to auditors. Don't get offended by the whys, the why questions. So the fact that you know that this audit ends, just give it time, answer every question that they've asked if you have the answers, but don't get offended. Don't put on a gloomy face because they're asking you questions. Do not sign anything on behalf of the project. Yeah. Most of us are working under the PIs, or if it's a department, you work under maybe the BASA or the departmental head. Please let the right people sign. Even if you are the audit contact person, it doesn't give you the guarantee to sign the documents. Do not treat the auditor as a go-to person to vent any frustrations that may arise during the course of your work. So you might maybe get delays. Maybe the accountant might delay to deliver the financial reports to the auditor. Please don't show the auditors that you're disgruntled, that you're frustrated with your accountant. No, no, no. Just manage yourself with the accountant, handle your accountant without involving the auditors. I hope maybe some of you or all of you will find it useful as you're implementing your work, especially the program administrators. Thank you very much.
Okay, so at this point, we are going to hear some closing remarks from Susan Mogumia. She's the principal investigator of the G11 Research Administration Project at Infectious Diseases Research Collaboration.
Thank you very much, Claire, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you, Rhoda, for that excellent presentation. And I want to thank you again for accepting to share your experience. You know, at the start of these sessions, we actually sent out a form to get training needs assessment. And we had a question that was asking people to say if they could share their experience. We got flat nose from people, but I was so impressed that there were others who came out to say they would like to share their experience, and Rhoda was one of them. And for that, we are very grateful. We've had a number of sessions, and this is actually our last session. We have gone through a lot of topics, and I'm sure that we've learned something from each of those sessions that we had. I would want to thank all our facilitators. I think I've seen Ronald on the call. Thank you so much. I have personally never met Ronald. We just started talking when he agreed to prepare a presentation, and it was such an excellent one. I want to thank all of you, our participants who have attended our lunchtime series. At the beginning, it was such a daunting task. We didn't know whether people would join the call. We didn't know how we would even conduct the sessions during this pandemic, but I'm glad that we have managed, and every week people have attended the call. And I think from our database, we see about 50 very active members. So I hope we can continue to learn from each other. And our next step will really be our virtual research admin support center. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we have a virtual support center. One of the elements of it is a WhatsApp group, and we will soon launch our webpage where you'll be able to come and access resources. For some of you who missed the sessions, we shall post our recordings there. We shall also allow you to call if you have any questions, and we shall try and answer them. But remember, we are learning from each other, so please feel free to post questions in our WhatsApp group, on our webpage when we launch it, or on our email. Please feel free to send the questions forward. We'll be able to answer them. Let us continue learning from each other. And I want to thank you once again for helping us to, implement this section of our project. Despite the pandemic, we have been able to learn from each other. So I want to encourage you to continue taking care of yourselves, stay safe, and you'll definitely beat the pandemic. Thank you all for listening, and let's continue engaging on the WhatsApp group. Thank you.